Welcome everyone to episode 33 of Raw Sport. My name is Ahmed El Houli, and boy oh boy do we have a big one. Tony, how are you, buddy? How's things?
Good morning, Ahmed, and good evening, Declan, from where you are in Los Angeles at the moment.
Tony, hi, how are you, mate? Ahmed, hi.
Hello, Declan. Well, today's a big one. We've had a massive fight weekend, a massive fight week. We have the man himself, Mr. Dec Warrington, boxing, an esteemed boxing journalist, one of the royalties in boxing journalism, I believe. Declan, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you? How's things?
Mate, I'm particularly good after that introduction. Thank you. I'm not sure I deserve it, but yeah, thanks all the same.
You got to take the plaudits when they come, Declan.
Yeah, they don't come very often, mate. That's the problem.
Hey, now I said in the intro that you're in Los Angeles. Where do we find you specifically?
Redondo Beach, just south of Hermosa Beach. It's basically I'm spending the week here because I'm going on to Alvarez Munguia next. I was in New York, as you know, for Haney Garcia, and instead of flying back to London, just getting over the jet lag, flying back even further again to Vegas, I decided to come here for the sunshine, work from here, move on to Vegas while adjusted, basically.
Yeah, certainly the differences in the cities are poles apart. You were in Brooklyn 24 hours ago, and now you're on the beaches of Los Angeles. Yeah,
but it was foggy when I arrived, and it's still foggy now, so it's not quite what it's cracked up to be.
Beautiful.
It'll definitely get sunny during your stay. That's definitely LA. Chaotic fight week. Probably one of the most chaotic we've seen in a long time. You were there from Monday, so you've seen it all. Take us through it, buddy.
Yeah, chaotic's a word. Well, to be honest, I should probably start by saying what a terrific fight it ended up being. Surpassed my expectations. I arrived in New York on Monday evening because the official build-up was starting on Tuesday. Haney and Garcia had a head-to-head on the viewing platform at the top of the Empire State Building. Now, before we even got up to the viewing platform, I arrived just before Garcia did. And the Haneys, as I refer to them, but they're not all Haney's family, is what you would call wider entourage, were, I thought, strategically placed in an attempt to intimidate Garcia. And it got quite rowdy very quickly, heated very quickly, and Devin Haney hadn't even arrived at that point. And obviously, let's face it, we all arrived at fight week ready to observe Ryan Garcia because of his frankly unsettling behaviour, erratic behaviour, ill-advised use of social media since the fight was announced, and wanted to observe him because he's divided opinion. Some people are saying he's struggling with his mental health. Others are saying he's faking it to sell the fight. And I made a conscious attempt from then to observe him as closely as I could, and I thought he was supercharged then on a Tuesday, hyper. It didn't feel comfortable to me, and then we went towards the top of the Empire State Building, and I had a few layers on, and I was very cold, and the same applied to everyone else, inevitably, because it's so high up and there's no protecting you from the wind. And Garcia was stood up there topless. I don't know how he didn't feel freezing cold. And you can speculate maybe that he's at his racing mind, just completely distracted from it. What I did observe there, above all else, I mean, maybe he's just resistant to the cold. Some people are. Was how big he looked. I looked at him then and I thought, there's no way you're going to make super lightweight, or there's no way you're on course to make super lightweight. And the fact that he was topless suggested he wasn't even trying to make it, because Haney arrived shortly after, for example. He had several layers on. That's what you will typically see a fighter do during fight week, because they're trying to, as healthy as possible, boil down to whatever the weight limit is when they weigh in on a Friday afternoon. Then Bill Haney, and the Haneys arrived led by Bill Haney, who I think is all about his psychological warfare. And it got very heated very quickly. Ryan Garcia was already wound up and ready to bite. Probably arrived like that, and then what happened downstairs wouldn't have helped. And then Bill Haney, frankly, classlessly, repeatedly started to say he was sending Devin Haney in there to assassinate Ryan Garcia, and he made sure people knew he wasn't mincing his words, and he said it again and again, and it was a reminder off the back of the press tour of how personal it had become between them. And frankly, with the benefit of hindsight, I think that played into what we ended up seeing on the Saturday. We had the media workouts on a Wednesday at Gleason's gym in Brooklyn. Garcia was again supercharged, again restless, and I was prioritizing trying to observe him because, frankly, going into this fight, Ryan was the most interesting story as well.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, I noticed what I thought was a facial tick, and I don't think that. I mean, he's the best actor we've ever seen. If he was putting that on, I noticed he'd almost start saying the next thing before he stopped saying what he was already saying. He'd change his mind he'd say something, he'd take it back. And again, he didn't seem in a great place, but he didn't shy away from any questions. And at the open workout, they had, media workout, I should say, they had a lot of amateur fighters there, and he was very warm to him, gave him a lot of time signing his gloves. Haney showed up afterwards, and Garcia again looked far too big to be weighing in at super lightweight.
Well, Dec, that being said, do you suspect something untoward from the Garcia camp if you are standing on top of the tallest building in New York, topless, and without fear or favour as to what the elements are doing, and then as you say, he looked far too big for the weight division? We know he came in over, but are we suspecting something untoward?
I don't think he ever attempted to make 140. I think, and I even wonder if the bet they made at the press conference on Thursday afternoon was why he came in at 143.2. I suspect he would have been even higher than that. At that media workout, I spoke to a really respected matchmaker who wasn't working for Golden Boy, but he was present, and I asked him what he thought, and he said he looked like he was weighing in his 150s to him. Now, that is still... there's still time to cut that down, but we're talking about a fighter who this time last year weighed in at a catch weight of 136 pounds. So I refuse to believe he's not a teenager who's just shot up in weight. I refuse to believe he couldn't have made 140 if he really wanted to. So when you ask if there's something untoward from the Garcia team when he's topless, etc., I think it would have been agreed that they weren't going to attempt to make 140 because they recognised Garcia was the underdog, and their best bet was attempting to bully Devin Haney. I don't think it was down to anyone other than Ryan Garcia that he was topless on both the Tuesday and the Wednesday. I think that's Ryan knowing his marketability. Frankly, again, not being in the right frame of mind.
But was he? Was that all a setup?
Completely lacking subtlety. Sorry, what was that?
Was that? Do you think that was all a setup to create hype around the fight? I mean, he spoke of Illuminati rituals and satanic type scenarios, and people thought he was going to end up in a mental institution. Yeah,
I don't believe that was set up to promote the fight. I do think Garcia is too big. That's applied to him up until now, and I think what you've actually seen is, sadly, a man who has been struggling with his mental health and who has been unraveling to a degree. I don't think that's anything to do with selling a fight. I think, in the most simple sense, I think we would be wasting our times trying to rationalise a lot of what Ryan Garcia was coming out with, because I think he's been in a rational place for quite some time.
Declan, you said something happened downstairs. What happened downstairs?
I didn't see that. We were moved along into an adjacent room because that's at the bottom of the Empire State Building. There is a mock Empire State Building where people can stand and get their photos done. So that's where both fighters were due to get their photos done. It was in the corridor which Garcia walked through, and again, I didn't actually see the incident. I just heard the shouting. But before I went into that room where the photo opportunities were going to take place, I saw members of Haney entourage lining this corridor. So I have no doubt there was some sort of intimidation that went on, whether that be insults flying or something more physical. I don't know. No one
take us through the numbers. Dec, take us through the numbers. Would have been, like, are these guys 6'8", 150 kilos, all standing over Garcia?
Not 6'8", not heavyweights, but all considerably bigger men than Ryan Garcia. Everyone without fail, yeah, all considerably bigger men than me as well. So we're talking, they're probably all at the very least be light heavyweights. I mean, these, when you call entourage, these are working in security at the same time. You have to be a certain profile of man to be able to work as security, at least effectively.
Yeah. And what are we saying, that the Haney crew had, I don't know, say a dozen compared to Garcia's 3? Paint the picture for us.
That's one of the things I couldn't help but admire about Garcia throughout fight week, regardless of my concerns for him, was his refusal to be bullied. He was very much, despite it being a Golden Boy promotion and him being the Golden Boy fighter, and Oscar De La Hoya and Bernard Hopkins being willing to flank him wherever possible, Garcia was very much a lone ranger against the Haneys and against their attempts to bully him. And he was quite happy showing up to stuff by himself, and he always made a point of standing his ground. He was not going to be bullied. I went to the fight between Devin Haney and Regis Prograis in December when Prograis was defending champion, not Haney. And Haney's attempts to do the same thing then. They are bullies. They are bullies. They believe in mental warfare. And, that some of the very best fighters in history have succeeded largely because of getting inside their opponents' minds before they fought. But I can go back to the final press conference of the fight between Haney and Garcia, and Bill Haney had got printed out some New Orleans, relevant to the New Orleans culture, some posters in an attempt to provoke Regis Prograis. Now, Regis Prograis is as natural-born fighter as you'll ever meet. Street fighter, won't be intimidated by anyone. I think, though Garcia was willing to stand his ground, I don't think he's as resistant to it as Prograis did. Prograis didn't bite. Prograis stood his ground, and I think it would have frustrated Haney that he could see it wasn't making an attempt to me. Ryan Garcia was reacting. That's the difference.
What would you say?
There's a pattern of behaviour here. This is what the Haneys do. Is how they approach a fight.
Do you think, based off what you witnessed throughout the fight week, that the Haneys got too comfortable thinking that this guy's off his head, not focused, and went into fight overconfident?
Yeah, without question. I say that with the benefit of hindsight and seeing the fight unfold. And frankly, I don't blame them for being overconfident, because I gave Garcia next to no chance. I didn't see anyone who struck me as what I would consider an authority give Garcia any chance. Sure, Golden Boy say that, but they have to say that. Any neutral thought Haney was going to win that fight, and that was partly, again, because of what we were seeing during fight week. And I think the Haneys made 2 mistakes. I mean, the difference is here, though I, perhaps you two as well, both strongly fancied Haney, it's not our job to make sure we're not complacent about things. It's those around Devin Haney have to make sure he isn't complacent. And I don't think they did their job properly. I do think they were overconfident. I think they thought they were getting the Garcia who probably quit against Tank Davis. I think they thought they were getting him at a low ebb, and I think they targeted him deliberately. And why wouldn't they? Because before it became clear that he wasn't in a good place, it was a big money fight, a high profile fight, one they were the favourites for. But that complacency extended to the tactics on fight night, which I thought very strange. And I know we're going to come back to that, but Haney is typically at his best on the back foot. And what we saw was him going on the front foot and at times attempting to walk down the bigger, heavier fighter and trading with him. And that made no sense. And I also think that perhaps partly owed to how personal it became. And I wonder if Bill Haney, who's not an experienced trainer, for all of the plaudits he's got, and quite rightly over the past few years, I wonder if that's inexperience and it got too personal for him, because it certainly sounded personal for him, and it sounded personal between he and Ryan Garcia's parents. And when he's saying things like, I'm sending him in there to assassinate him, I wonder if he wanted to go in there to actually hurt Ryan Garcia as opposed to just outbox him in the way that Devin Haney outboxed Regis Prograis back in December.
But Ryan Garcia did say, I think in the some of the media interviews pre-fight, he did say, I'm going to walk out of the ring with Devin Haney's head. So, look, I think it was like for like, but maybe not to the degree that the Haneys were saying to Garcia.
Yeah, I just think it was calculated from Bill Haney. That's the difference. And I think Ryan Garcia went into things not knowing what he was going to say, and it just rolled off the tongue. And again, I'm not medically qualified to determine this, but I don't think Garcia was in a rational frame of mind. And I don't think you can hold against him what he was saying to the same degree you could against Bill Haney, who is considerably older than 25 years old, and again made a point of saying things and said them at the right time. And if they weren't getting picked up on, he'd say them louder and he'd repeat them. He knew exactly what he was going to say. And to be honest, I don't think for a second he actually wanted Ryan Garcia to die in the ring, to be clear. But I think when you're talking about the nature of sport that we are, that fighters can die in the ring, I think it's a completely classless thing to say. And I asked Austin De La Hoya about that on the Tuesday, actually, still at the Empire State Building. And he said De La Hoya was involved in some pretty intense, angry, heated rivalries. And he said it went too far as well. And I can't disagree with him.
Did you speak to Derek James? And do you believe everyone is overlooking his genius strategy?
I attempted to speak to Derek James on several occasions, and every time I did so, he refused to speak to me. Now, I have spoken to him when he's been in the UK with Anthony Joshua, so I don't believe, frankly, I don't even think he remembers me from the UK. I don't believe he has.
He will now.
I think he didn't want to speak about the fight because he didn't want to be asked about Ryan Garcia's frame of mind. Because I think he knew as well as anyone. He probably knew better than most, in fact, given he would have spent the past 8 or so weeks alongside him most days. He knew Ryan Garcia wasn't in the condition he ideally would be to go into that fight. He also, for the sake of balance, I should add, I heard someone else ask him for an interview because they wanted to ask him about the rumours related to him splitting from Errol Spence. And he said, no, I can't talk about that either. So it wasn't just this fight he was shutting down. But it's very unusual for a trainer in a high-profile fight, mid-fight week, to not be willing to discuss the fight that's coming that weekend. But Derek James, though he doesn't, in my experience at least, seek speaking into microphones in the way that Bill Haney, for example, does, he was quiet and as short as he could be. He did not want to answer any difficult questions.
Declan, take us into fight night. I mean, the build-up sounded incredible. It was enthusiastic. There was a lot of rivalry to the point where it was, obviously tense. Take us into fight night.
So I took my seat, and as is almost always the case at fights of this magnitude, there was a big poster above the ring, big graphic, Haney Garcia. And I couldn't help but think this is a freak show because, again, nothing at the press conference on the Thursday. Garcia did not sound healthy then. On the Friday, he did not behave rationally. He came in overweight. It painted a horrible picture. And I had a sense of dread about the whole thing. I genuinely worried that Garcia was going to have some sort of breakdown in the ring. We were going to see some, an episode that we were talking about for years to come, along the lines of Oliver McCall, what he did in his rematch with Lennox Lewis. And I wasn't the only one thinking. In fact, almost everyone I spoke to in press row felt similarly. One respected member sat to my left, and he told me it felt like being at a bullfight. That's how it felt to him, because it felt so unfair. It felt so cruel. We saw when Garcia arrived, he was wearing a T-shirt that read "Murder on the Mind," which didn't inspire confidence. He was then in his changing room with violinists, which I think is a first, at least in my experience. I know Anthony Joshua came out with a ring walk with violinists, but that was part of the ring walk as opposed to them just serenading him in the dressing room.
Set the scene's genius.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, maybe it kept him calm. I think that was Garcia playing up to the accusations of, to use an ugly word, being crazy. But he didn't look great when he arrived, and then when he started making his way to the ring, I felt uncomfortable again because he just looked unhealthy. There was, the sweat you see on someone when they're in intense physical pain. This is not the sweat of someone who's had a warm-up and is in a healthy place. That's how he looked. He looked pale. He didn't look well, I didn't think. And he made his way to the ring, and he didn't look like he wanted to be there. And that enhanced the sense of dread, really. And then Haney came out looking healthy. And then we're going to come to this. One of the, in many respects, most dramatic fights I've ever seen took place.
How was the crowd? In person, it's obviously different.
Yeah, near sellout. Quite often, I find crowds in the US quite disappointing. Just on the quiet side, I guess. On the quiet side, and not overly passionate about one fighter or another. And New York, particularly, is that. I mean, people always talk about how New York can be when there's Puerto Rican fighters. So Miguel Cotto, Tito Trinidad was even more popular. But typically, it's what you get for a fight in the US is a lot of what they call walk-up tickets. So people on fight night finally decide, all right, I've got a Saturday night free. There's tickets going. Let's go and get a ticket. It's not the passionate crowd you might get in the UK or Australia where tickets are bought well in advance because someone's really behind that fighter. And so therefore you can watch a fight out there and they can lack an element of tension and they don't have the same atmosphere. But there was a terrific atmosphere this night. And I think that a lot of that was the tension. And, that I think that's because a lot of people were fearing a car crash as well. But when there's tension before a fight, that typically feeds into an intense atmosphere. And Garcia hurt Haney in the first round. Haney seemed the crowd favourite shortly before the fight started, by the way. But Garcia hurt Haney in the first round. And the crowd got into it. And that was, again, as vocal a crowd as I've encountered in the US.
Well, speaking of the crowd, and obviously you were there ringside, and for all of our Raw sports fans, you can talk about Mike Tyson being in the crowd, Roy Jones Jr., Evander Holyfield, Bernard Hopkins. I mean, you don't get bigger legends than these.
No, absolutely not. I mean, people in boxing are very aware of how to stay relevant, and they will accept invitations to these fights because it looks good for the broadcaster, it looks good for the promoter that they're there, and they get to remind people that they're there. And frankly, why would you not want to go and see some of these fights? There's something strange about that. I have to say, every time I see Mike Tyson at a fight in the US, I'm uncomfortable with it, or even around a fight, because he's treated like royalty. And I find it very strange that a convicted rapist is treated in that way. And I can remember being at, again, Davis Garcia a year ago at the weigh-in. Tyson was there on stage being treated like a VIP, and I saw Riddick Bowe attempting to get on stage, and he was being treated like an afterthought. And he looked, I mean, it was uncomfortable anyway, because Riddick Bowe's not in a good way physically nowadays. But I don't understand why Mike Tyson is treated so warmly for all that he achieved as a fighter and for all that he had a terrific career. And there are so many other retired fighters who aren't extended the same courtesy.
Is that an English bias?
No, well, maybe it is. No, I don't think so. I think it's just an observation I think I've made off the back of Tyson's past and the gravity of a lot of that and the uncomfortable juxtaposition with how he's treated nowadays, to my mind.
Yeah, and he's now a Hollywood star.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. He's Mike Tyson's royalty everywhere he goes.
Declan, how was the promotion overall? Being a Golden Boy, Golden Boy doesn't put on too many big fights nowadays. Since Alvarez left, how was the overall promotion?
Well, that was one of the most significant narratives going into this fight, I thought, by the way, because Garcia is without question Golden Boy's A-lister. And bearing in mind, 2 Saturdays after Garcia was due to fight Haney, Munguia, their second highest profile fighter, to my mind, is fighting Saul Alvarez. Now, Garcia was the underdog. Munguia is the underdog. I know Garcia just defied expectations, but I firmly expect Munguia to lose. And if they lost both of those fights, that would have been pretty damaging for Golden Boy. And I think that's partly why this fight went ahead, by the way, because I believe people at Golden Boy would have known this was not the best time for Garcia to be in a high-profile fight, any fight, frankly. And I think they were prioritising the income that comes with Ryan Garcia, and I think they were keeping DAZN happy because, as you've recognised, since they've lost Canelo Alvarez, they are not the influential, all-conquering promoter they once were. How was the fight promoted? I haven't seen anything about the pay-per-view numbers yet, but there was a near sellout crowd, and Barclays Centre the capacity, I believe, for a fight is in the region of 20,000. I went to Josh Taylor Teofimo Lopez last June. Now, that was in the theatre at Madison Square Garden. That's a smaller venue of around 4,000 or 5,000. New York, boxing hasn't been big in New York consistently for quite a few years. This is the biggest fight that's been in New York, to my mind, since Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, since Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz. Now, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano ticked all the boxes in so many ways for a fight in New York. Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz was a fight for.
Yeah.
Have I still got you?
Keep going.
Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz will fight for world heavyweight title. Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia is 2 West Coast fighters. It made Devin Haney from Oakland in Northern California and now lives in Las Vegas. Ryan Garcia is from LA. New York, a strange venue, but they sold out the fight pretty well. I don't know to what extent that's Garcia's profile, to what extent that's a narrative around Garcia, but the fight was sold out, so I don't think Golden Boy can have any complaints.
Would have thought a fight like this would have been in Vegas. What took it to New York? Do you know anything about that?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I would have thought a fight like this would have been in Vegas or in California, but it ended up in New York. Do you know what?
Yeah, I asked Bernard Hopkins about this because for that very why would 2 West Coast fighters be fighting on the East Coast? My suspicion in advance was, again, I know it was a Golden Boy promotion, but I thought it was Devin Haney calling the shots because the Haneys kind of felt like they conquered Vegas to a degree last year when they had a big fight there with Vasyl Lomachenko. Now, that was Haney's first fight back in the US after twice winning fights in Australia against George Kambosos. They then went on to Oakland and drew an even bigger crowd against Regis Prograis. And on this occasion with a crowd favourite. So I think they left that night feeling like they conquered Northern California, maybe conquered the West Coast. And I thought this was them attempting to expand into the East Coast. When I spoke to Hopkins about it, and the reason I very deliberately asked Hopkins because he arguably had his finest night as a professional at Madison Square Garden when he beat Trinidad. He said it was because they were both West Coast fighters. They didn't want to give one or the other the advantage. Haney's based in Vegas. A lot of people think Haney got the decision he didn't deserve against Vasyl Lomachenko. I disagree. I thought he did get that. I thought he deserved that fight. Garcia typically is based in LA, or has been previously, the Haneys wouldn't necessarily have been comfortable fighting there. So they brought it over to New York, made it as neutral as possible.
Wow, that's interesting. Wow, there you go. Action-packed week. Lots happened. We witnessed a great fight. Declan, you were there to cover all. You've been amazing. You've shared a ton of insight with us. Before we let you go, Tony, do you have any more questions for Declan?
Yeah, well, one more for Declan. What did you think of the result?
I think it's one of the best underdog stories we've seen for a long time. And I thought that immediately as soon as the fight was over. I scored a point in Garcia's favour, by the way.
Despite the fact one was taken away.
Yeah. So, and I can see I was pleasantly surprised Garcia got the decision because I wasn't overly comfortable. I wasn't overly confident that he'd done enough to win the fight. Largely because I gave 2 rounds. I scored 2 rounds as though Haney had been knocked down twice, even though he hadn't been knocked down twice in both of those rounds. He'd just been knocked down once. But that's because of the beating he was continuing to take on his feet. And I don't think enough judges do score rounds in that way when they should. And I think that would, if they did that, it would negate some of the bad scores we see. But as soon as the fight was over, as soon as the score was announced, I remember thinking what an incredible story it was. Even at the final bell, I thought it was an incredible story. I think I still expected Haney to get the decision. Even in the 7th or 8th round, I remember thinking, and I still thought he was on course to lose. And at that point, I would have had Haney ahead. I remember thinking, doesn't matter if Garcia wins this now. He's been so exciting up to this point against the odds that he's enhanced his profile now, and he will continue to get big fights. The big question is here now, I think, is not, is Garcia an outstanding fighter? We knew he had fast hands. We knew he was heavy-handed. It's what limitations did this expose in Devin Haney now? Was this complacency? And I know I've already said I think they got their tactics wrong, and maybe got their tactics wrong because it became too personal and because they were complacent. Or were their tactics different, and did he get hurt in the first round and respond badly to it and fight the wrong fight as a consequence of getting hurt in the first round? And if so, was that inexperience or is that a limitation as a fighter? He styled himself on Floyd Mayweather in so many ways, and some people like to compare him to Floyd Mayweather, and he's a very good fighter, but he's not on a par with Floyd Mayweather. But to make a comparison with him, there was a fight between Floyd Mayweather and Shane Mosley. I want to say 2009. It may have been 2010. Mosley hurt Mayweather seriously early on in that fight. Mayweather adjusted, and Mosley didn't get anywhere near him for the rest of the evening. And so that was Haney showing some limitations. But maybe that is an experience. Maybe he'll learn from that when he comes again. But I suspect there'll be enough money in the rematch. But the question might be where that rematch takes place. I'm not sure Garcia will be boiling himself down to 140 pounds in a hurry if his post-fight comments or anything to go by.
Well, hopefully Haney can get some new trunks by the next rematch.
Well, it's not just fight night, is it? He dresses unusually all week.
Well, he looked like that he was in his pajamas.
Yeah, it was the boots as well, wasn't it? It just brought me back to that. The fact that it took me a second to catch up with that, by the way, is a reflection of what a crazy night it was and everything that was worth analysing, because something like that, people were talking about really early on about the triumph it was for Garcia because of what a fight it was and because of what a story it became.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Declan, thank you very much, mate. I definitely appreciate you taking the time to join us. Any parting words before we let you go, buddy?
No. Thank you for your time, gents. It's been a pleasure.
We look forward to reading all about your stuff from the fight and also in 2 weeks' time in Vegas.
Cheers, gents. All the best. Thanks again.
Thanks, legends. Take care, everyone. We'll catch you all on the next episode of Raw Sport. See you later.